Hey everybody, when I started thinking about how-to videos and what the most useful thing to teach teachers in my building how to do in terms of online learning, I thought that they all understand intuitively how to use Screencast-O-Matic by now or Google Slides by now, but really what we weren't given a lot of time to consider when we were made to go completely online because of the pandemic was how best to turn what used to be a face-to-face lesson into a screencast, what to consider. So that's what I really want to talk about in terms of my how-to. Couple of things that I want teachers to consider and that I want people to kind of think meta about are these 4 points. Number one, students can pause as well as fast forward. I had the luxury prior to the pandemic to recording all of my lessons, and then I actually sat and watched my students watch these lessons. So I learned something immediately, which is that my students didn't watch the lessons, that they merely just kind of used the seek button to skip past to get to the information that they were using to get to. So all of a sudden, your pacing and your sequencing in a lesson go completely out the window when you go from face-to-face to online. Another thing I needed to consider was that what students really need to see in the lesson versus what's just nice to show them. In marine science, we show a lot of clips. I can't show these same clips on Screencast-O-Matic because I'm posting it online and it's a copyright violation. Also, if I have components of my lesson that have strong problem-solving demonstrations, students need to see me physically solve this problem, like a math teacher or something. Maybe certain programs like Google Slides or PowerPoint aren't good for that. Maybe I need to do something else. You're going to see an example of that. Last two things is understanding that you have complete control over this lesson and you only need to do one. So unlike a regular lesson that's a lot up in the air, here you have one lesson that's going to be for time immemorial and you can just get it perfect. And that's something that teachers don't really get an opportunity to have later on. And last, keeping in mind sound quality and what information is appropriate in a face-to-face setting versus online. Again, this is something that you wouldn't hear, but me doing that on my computer is annoying for someone to hear in a online versus a face-to-face instruction. Also, the idea that I'm teaching in my classroom, which is all hard surfaces, is really echoey, not very good. Also, maybe my slides are a little wordy. Maybe I need to eliminate certain information because they don't need to copy it down, or I'm not going to read it out to them in the same way. An example of this would be my tides lesson. So first off and foremost, again, going back to this idea that you have to understand that students can pause and fast forward. So if I play this, right, and I'll put on the audio in a second, but what students are going to do is they're going to seek forward and look for particular things in this lesson. So they're going to look for instance, these red words or this picture that matches up with their notes. So in order to stop them from doing it, what I've done is, or to try to get them to stop doing it, too, because it has to do with the tides diagram. And I've started beginning the lesson with why this lesson exists. This lesson exists because it contains information about this tides diagram that you've seen, and this is what I really need you to understand, these 2 bullet points, before you really even begin to understand that lesson. That's really important. I would never do this, write this out like this in my lesson, right? But it's online, right? I would usually, face-to-face, I would just say it and be like, okay, cool. But now it's online, so writing it out and then going back to it at the end. If you look, my last slide is the same as my first slide, right? And the reason is for that I can actually control what I want my students to see, and I can go back to it, I can circle it, I can get it right. I can control the flow of this lesson, at least in terms of information gathering. Also, explanation on how to do this diagram is difficult. And so it became necessary for me to actually, in the middle of the lesson, break out of PowerPoint and think, okay, well, I would usually show them how to do this on the blackboard. We don't have a blackboard. So what can I do that's like a blackboard? Well, it was paint. I basically just went into paint and I started manipulating paint in the way that I would manipulate the tides diagram on the blackboard. Again, being sensitive to this idea that face-to-face instruction is different than online instruction. So going back, right, I accounted for the fact that students can pause and fast forward by bookending my lesson. And that goes into this idea that I have control of this lesson so I can understand what students want to get out of it, why they're there, and account for that. I can think about what they really need to do. So I decided what they really need to see. So I decided to break out of slides and PowerPoint and go into that. And last, I recorded this entire thing in my closet to account for sound quality. So these are the things that I think every educator needs to consider when going from a face-to-face setting to online instruction.